Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So today we will be looking at the epilogue, and we are coming to the end of our study of the Buddha and his Dhamma. But as we discussed in the previous classes, the ending of the Buddha and his Dhamma is very important for us to understand, because there is a lot to explore and a lot to study. So similarly, what we are going to study today in terms of the section 2 of the epilogue, which is titled as a vow to spread his Dhamma. And there are 4 vows in this epilogue 2, which are very important. So before I go into discussing the content of the epilogue, I'm going to point out to something very important, that though the reference is given here of the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, volume 10, page number 168, the content itself is very important because it's found all over the places wherever there is a Mahayana tradition. So in the Mahayana tradition, or what is very famous in the world as Zen tradition or Chan tradition in Chinese, these 4 vows are very fundamental, and they are recited all over the places during the rituals, or even day-to-day practice of the Dhamma. So these vows, which are coming at the end of the Buddha and his Dhamma, are very important, and we can look at those 4 vows from many different positions, and we can go in depth of what does this vow mean. And one of the ways by which we can look at these vows as taking refuge or Sharangaman in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. So before I go on discussing these 4 vows, let me read it as they are presented in the Buddha and his Dhamma. And presentation is of importance to understand. So the vow number 1 is, there are beings without limit. Let us take the vow to convey them all across. This is the first vow. And these 4 vows are also known as the vows of a bodhisattva. So if we ever aspire to the life of a bodhisattva, these 4 vows are compulsory. They are the heart of the bodhisattva. And as we are going to see, that they go very deep into the Buddhist practices. So I'm going to read the vow number 1 again. There are beings without limit. Let us take the vow to convey them across. There are depravities in us without number. Let us take the vow to extinguish them all. The vow number 3, there are truths without end. Let us take the vow to comprehend them all. Vow number 4, there is the way of Buddha without comparison. Let us take the vow to accomplish it perfectly. So these 4 vows, they seem to be like, very less in number, but they, as it were, constitute the very heart of the Buddha's teachings, the very heart of the practices that have been taught by Dr. Ambedkar throughout the Buddha and his Dhamma. So, as I said, that a bodhisattva, or somebody who is devoted to the life of an enlightenment and compassionate action in the world, they have to take these vows. Now, they are not just something that you take as a rule. They are so fundamental that you vow. There is a beautiful word in Indic language, pratidnya, and we know about 22 vows, isn't it? They are so fundamental to practice Buddhism. Likewise, these are the vows. They are not precepts. They are not some kind of a directions that we have seen. They have to be taken as the vows, as a commitment to them. So vow, by its very nature, implies the commitment with our lives, with our total being. So these vows are to be taken with a commitment, with our total being, with our total existence. So you see, it interestingly begins with a compassionate sort of living for life. And the word says like this: there are beings without limit. So you see, there are, if you look at the world around, we cannot count the number of sentient beings in the world. It's always, if you look at the human population throughout, the history, it has grown enormously. If you look at the other, living beings, they are, we cannot count them. They are uncountable. And at the vow says that, there are beings without number, without limit. And what is my vow? My vow is to take them across. Now, this is a very fundamental to Buddhism, to take the living beings across. It means to guide them to the other shore. And we know the word paramita. Paramita means other shore. So you see, this is like, the Buddha has likened his Dhamma with a raft, to convey us to the other shore. And he says that, the vow, the heart of the vow is this, is that of a compassion. And what is the compassion all about? That I am going to help every single living being without exception to cross across, to go to the other shore, to attain the nirvana, isn't it? So the heart of this vow is to cultivate the paramitas in a way that will help others to cross the stream, cross the sea of suffering. So you see, this is very important for us to understand that the Buddhist practice has no end. It's endless. The beings are limitless, and so the practice is limitless, isn't it? There is no end to the Buddhist practice. We cannot say that I have now practiced the compassion enough, now I'm done with it, and I have nothing to do. It's not like that, isn't it? These vows, the first vow is considered to be sort of giving us a kind of a perspective that the Buddhist practice is the practice that never ends. It continues to help to convey the sentient beings across. So what we need to do is to really grasp the essence of this vow in terms of, there are beings without limit. If we put a limit that we are going to help only this kind of people or that kind of a people or this category of people or that category of people or these animals or that animals, our vow to convey the beings across the sea of suffering is incomplete. So by the very virtue of the Buddhist practice is we cannot have any differentiating mind. We cannot differentiate between the beings. We cannot, make them into fixed categories. We have to see the people, the world itself, in a very changing manner, that the world is subjected to transformation, the world is subjected to change, the world is subjected to undergo, transformation. So transformation is the basic law of the world. And whatever that is, the most important thing is the Buddhist vows begin with a compassionate action. Without a compassionate action, without compassion, we cannot, practice the Buddha's Dhamma. And that's what is made clear in this very first vow of the Bodhisattvas. The second vow, I'm going to come back to these vows again and again. The second vow is very important. There are depravities in us without number. Let's take the vow to extinguish them all. We all the time feel that, we are a complete being, we are perfect ones. And as this vow goes, that, there are so many depravities in us. There are so many impurities in us, if we have to use another word. There are so many shortcomings within us. And they are without number. We cannot count, how many shortcomings one has, how many failures one has. But the vow says that, how many in number they are, without number they are, I would take a vow to extinguish them all. Now, if you take these two vows together, we see a kind of a dynamism of the social or the transformation of the world that comes into play here, that we vow to convey all the sentient beings without number to the other shore. But that's not possible unless we work on our own depravities, unless we work on our own shortcomings, unless we try to extinguish our impurities. And I think that ties these two vows together in a very fundamental way, that we cannot help others unless we also try to help ourselves. And there are a lot of areas where we need help to remove the depravities within us. So let me read these two vows again. Number one is, there are beings without limit. Let's take the vow to convey them across. There are depravities in us without number. Let's take the vow to extinguish them all. And the third vow is also very important. And this is, if this vow we inculcate in our being, in our minds, it has got a tremendous sort of impact on whatever we do. These vows are like the attitude that we need to cultivate, isn't it? Never to take rest, never to stop working on our own being. And the third and very important one is, there are truths without end. Let's take the vow to comprehend them all, isn't it? There is no dearth of truth. The knowledge is not finite. There is always something to know. There is always something to understand. There is always something to master. There is always something to know. There is always something to understand, isn't it? So this is very important. It gives a mind a kind of an openness that we all need when we live our lives. So it's a beautiful way of conveying the kind of the openness of the mind which is ever ready to learn, the mind which is ever ready to explore, understanding that there are many truths, and there are truths without end. There is no end to understand, isn't it? Today what we know, tomorrow it might not be true, isn't it? So there is no end to knowing the truths. And the vow number 3 is very important. There are truths without end. Let's take the vow to comprehend them all, isn't it? Our attitude should not be, limited. It's just like the mind of Baba Ambedkar. Whenever he talked about the knowledge or the pursuit of the truth, he was never satisfied. Even after having mastered so many disciplines in his life, he said that I have just wetted my toe in the ocean of the knowledge, isn't it? So we have to understand that this is a very important vow that we need to inculcate in our being about understanding the truth. There are truths without end. There is no end to knowing. There are so many truths scattered in so many ways, and the vow is to comprehend them all. The fourth vow is also very deep. Now, you see, it's about faith. And, the faith in Buddhism is very important word to understand. It's like Sat means the truth and Dha means to hold. Isn't it? The original meaning of the word Saddha, or in Pali, in the latter Indic language, because Shraddha has an original root in sort of Sattadha, in terms of holding on to the truth, isn't it? And what is the truth that the Buddha realized? That the Buddha realized the depth of the human predicaments, human suffering, and he found a way forward to that. And we have been studying that from last many weeks. But here it's very important to take this vow. What is this vow? There is the way of the Buddha without comparison. The Dhamma is without comparison. It's very rare to come across the teachings of the Buddha. It's very rare to take the human birth. It's very rare to come across the teachings of the Buddha. It's very rare to realize the truth, by practicing the way of the Buddha. Very, very rare. So here, the vow number 4 goes like this. There is the way of the Buddha without comparison. There is unparalleled, anuttaro. The Buddha's Dhamma is anuttaro. There is no parallel to what the Buddha taught. And the vow is to, let's take the vow to accomplish it perfectly, isn't it? So traditionally, whenever we talk about the Buddha's Dhamma, we talk about, Sila, Samadhi, Prajna. And there are many ways by which, the Buddha's Dhamma can be practiced. Many ways. And we are supposed to be open to all of them, to have that attitude of being open to the Buddha's teachings. And as the vow number 4 goes, there is the way of Buddha without comparison. Let's take the vow to accomplish it perfectly, not imperfectly, perfectly. So let me read these 4 vows again, so that we get into the orbit of this very important practice in Buddhism to take the vows, and these 4 vows are fundamental to practicing the way of life of a bodhisattva. We can just keep those vows in our mind and think about our own bodhisattva, Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and then we begin to get the glimpse of the Buddha's, the great path of the Buddha. So there are beings without limit. Let us take the vow to convey them across. There are depravities in us without number. Let's take the vow to extinguish them all. There are truths without end. Let's take the vow to comprehend them all. There is the way of Buddha without comparison. Let's take the vow to accomplish it perfectly. Now, some of the Buddhist practitioners, they equate these 4 vows with taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. And I find this is very important, because whenever we talk about the Buddhang Saranam Gacchami, Dhammang Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami, they just become a sort of recitals. But here it's very clearly put as to how we can practice taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha on the day-to-day basis, on the moment-to-moment basis. So if we have to take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha in a more profound way, these are the 4 vows that offers us a complete path of practice as to how we can take the refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. So we have to have an attitude or vow to help all the sentient beings, and they are without limit, and therefore there is no limit to our practice. Our practice of the Buddha Dhamma is endless. It has no end. Secondly, we have to work on our own depravities. There are many, isn't it? They are without number. So many, mental states we have, and the combinations of the negative mental states, isn't it? And they are many without number. And we have to take the vow to extinguish them all. And there are truths without end. There are so many truths that we have to know. There is no one absolute truth, isn't it? And we have to take vow to comprehend them all, isn't it? We have to aspire to comprehend all the truths. And there is the way of Buddha without comparison. Let's take the vow to accomplish it perfectly. When we try to live in a way that these vows become the center to our lives, we are actually meaningfully living the life of a Buddhist, of taking the refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha all the time. So there are other variations of it, and I'm going to look at some of the translations, because they were originally in Sanskrit, but they are found mostly in the Chinese and Japanese tradition, very beautifully, poetically written, put on the walls of the temples, put on the walls of their homes. So they're very fundamental, very important for the Mahayana countries. So let me look at this other translations. Like one of the translation goes like this: the Dharma gates are infinite. To attain to enlightenment, there are many Dharma gates. I vow to master them all. So you see, there are many Dharma gates, and the vow is to master them all. The way of the Buddha is unsurpassable. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. There is no comparison to the Buddha way, the Dhamma. I vow to attain it. I vow to attain the way of the Buddha. Living beings are innumerable. I vow to save them. Delusive passions are inexhaustible. The delusive passions that I have are inexhaustible. I vow to extinguish them. So this is the another translation of it, and I'm going to read the another translation of it, which is sort of very poetic and done from the Chinese sources. The same vows, 4 vows. So this translation goes like this: however innumerable beings may be, I vow to save them all. However inexhaustible the passions may be, I vow to transform them all. However limitless the Dharma may be, I vow to comprehend it completely. However infinite the Buddha's truth is, I vow to realize it. So you see, you begin to get an idea of the spirit of these 4 vows that we have just looked into. And this is the way by which our Buddhist life unfolds on the moment-to-moment basis. On whatever difficulties we face in our lives, we come back to what is called the 4 vows. And as I said, that is 4 vows are fundamental to the Mahayana Buddhist countries, and they are so important that they are recited every day. They are like the heart of the practice of the Buddhist in the Mahayana tradition. So before opening our class for the further discussion, I'm going to reflect a bit on each of them one by one. So there are beings without limit. There is no end to the beings. There are so many beings. So is our practice. Our practice is not limited to one human being or another human being or this being, that being. It's limitless. So the cultivation of the practice is endless. It aims at saving all the human beings, carry them across to the Nibbana. There are depravities in us without number. We have so many impurities, we have so many complexes, we have so many depravities within us, and the vow is to work on them, to extinguish them all. And there are no ends to truth. There are so many truths, and the vow is to comprehend them all. And there is the way of Buddha without comparison. Let's take the vow to accomplish it perfectly. So the pith of these 4 vows of the Bodhisattva are actually the way to take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha on our day-to-day basis, on the moment-to-moment basis. Every time we take the refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. In other words, we surrender our body, speech, and mind to these vows and let the vow work the magic on us, isn't it? Whenever we have this commitment to something, the transformation begins to take place, isn't it? So whenever we surrender, or we take these 4 vows as the basis of our own lives, the vows start making the transformation within us, because they convey a vision that is otherwise not possible to us to understand. So the second section of the epilogue is, we can see 4 vows, but they are profound. As it were, they capture the very heart of the Buddha and his Dhamma. If you know these 4 vows, and if we put in practice these 4 vows as if we are practicing the entire Buddha and his Dhamma, we are practicing the very heart of Baba Sahib's being. We are practicing the essence of Baba Sahib's life. And I think that's very well put in the Buddha and his Dhamma at the end of it. And when the next time we study the very last part of the Buddha and his Dhamma, we are going to see as to how that also reflect back on the entire Buddha and his Dhamma. So we cannot express enough gratitude to Baba Sahib Ambedkar for pointing out to something which is very important for every human being to realize in their lives. So before I open up, I'm going to recite these 4 vows again, and then we'll keep on discussing. So these 4 vows: a vow to spread his Dhamma. There are beings without limit. Let's take the vow to convey them across. There are depravities in us without number. Let's take the vow to extinguish them all. There are truths without end. Let's take the vow to comprehend them all. There is the way of Buddha without comparison. Let's take the vow to accomplish it perfectly. So I will stop here and open up the class for discussion, reflection, or anything that you would like to share. So anybody can comment, reflect, share.
Sir, Sir, I was reading one of the reasons for the decline of Buddhism was Buddhists shown great zeal for conversion. So that's why they met it with a greater resistance compared to Jainism. So how should we engage with other who have different belief than us? Because it doesn't, if other person have same belief, then it doesn't challenge much. If other has a different belief, then it takes more emotional energy from us. And but there is a greater transformative power of because of love and friendship, the ideologies give blood in and there is a chance for transformation. So how our conduct should be the guide, or how should we engage?
Yes. You see, this Bodhisattva vows have been, titled by Baba Sahib Ambedkar as a vow to spread his Dhamma. And elsewhere he has said that to spread the Buddha's Dhamma is to serve the humankind. Isn't it? So if you and in the Buddhist tradition, there are various kinds of dana or various kind of sharing which we do with the others, and offering them comforts, material comforts, offering them knowledge, offering them confidence. And one of the way by which we can benefit other human beings is by sharing the Dhamma, which is the ultimate path to the freedom, right? So in a sutta, the Buddha said that I have no quarrel with the world. The world has a quarrel with me, because the Buddhist position as such is that of taking no position. Now it's very difficult not to take the position, isn't it? Because all the time we are taking the positions based on our self of atta, or I, or me, or myself, isn't it? My ideology, my this and my that. The Buddha is somebody who will never take a position from that point of view. He will be open. So the first way I think we can help to spread the Dhamma is to being open to all the beings, irrespective of wherever they come from. And this is very difficult to be open, because we cannot be open because of our own conditionings. We have this already formed ideas, already formed dogmas, already formed belief system. And interestingly, Buddhism is not about belief system. It's about examining. It's about pariksha. It's about vivek, isn't it? To be able to distinguish what is right and wrong. It is an attitude of a kalama sutta. So how we can spread the Dhamma? Of course, we need to teach the basic teachings of the Buddha. Of course, we have to indulge into dialogues with the people on many forums, and that's what the Buddha did, isn't it? Whatever you see, whenever people encounter the Buddha, they question the Buddha, and in response to their questions, the Buddha answered them and brought them to a level where they could see, isn't it? So our position or our attitude is to be able to make other people see what is the reality, what is the truth. And it is not going to happen in a single day. It's going to take time, isn't it? It's not going to there is no magical wand. There is need to exert ourselves. There is a need to really make ourselves capable also. In order to teach the Dhamma, we should have knowledge of the Dhamma. We should have the knowledge of these 4 vows are guide to us. And we have to have a language. We have to know other people. What kind of cultural background they come from, what kind of practices they have, and we have to know the comparative study of the religions, and we have to be able to point out what is wrong in terms of these ideologies which can cause human suffering, isn't it? The best example is Baba Sahib's book Philosophy of Hinduism, where he goes on criticizing Hinduism, but not from the angry point of view. He goes on to look into the religion from the norms of liberty, equality, fraternity, and justice, isn't it? And I think we have to make efforts. We have to make individual efforts. We have to make combined efforts. And it's not that the Buddhism couldn't convert people, isn't it? It was a popular faith of India, for a long time, for long time. Even it today continues to live. The Buddhist ideas or the Buddhist perspectives, the Buddhist cultivation of compassion still goes on inspiring people, that we found in what is called the Santa tradition. And in so many ways, whatever we is handed down to us by the history has been informed very largely by Buddhism, isn't it? So I think that's a very difficult question to answer, but I think these 4 vows sort of help us to have a method to spread the Dhamma. Right, Dara?
Yes, sir.
Anybody has anything to say, any comments?
Sir, in this, the first vow means you have to rightly said that we have to go the Buddha way. We have to travel and reach to the people and make the dialogues. and the misconceptions and blindfoldness that we have to first we have to keep ourselves sound enough to spread the light.
Right, right. You see, this vow number 4, there is the way of Buddha without comparison. Let's take the vow to accomplish it perfectly. Now, it can be interpreted in very many ways. The way of the Buddha is the way that our tradition, historical Buddha has walked, isn't it? The Buddhacharya. That can be one of the ways by understanding it. The way of the Buddha can also mean his Dhamma, isn't it? The path that the Buddha taught. So I think, taking it as, following the Buddha is also a very interesting way of looking at it. Isn't it? What did the Buddha do in his life? He was enlightened at the age of 35. What did he do rest of his life? How we can follow the Buddha? How we can follow the historical Buddha himself? Isn't it? And how we can follow, the Bodhisattvas like Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And their lives, their way of life,
Yeah.
the way they
I
live.
mean,
Yeah, the way they lived is, I think, incomparable. There is no comparison with the life of the Buddha, isn't it? The way he has lived and the way he has been in the world. And likewise, we can see so many, profound teachers around who have lived very, interesting lives, and how we can follow in their footsteps. So this can also mean following in the footsteps of the Buddha. Right, Umesh
I
bhai?
think, yes, sir. I think this is the only example in the world that the Buddha way can be achieved, and there are examples in every era available.
That's
If
true.
we,
Yeah.
if we notice the things, the development of humankind from the 2500 years ago, means in era eras, someone is there to this is a bad this relay race kind of thing, that people are there to prove that the Buddha way is very much proven way, and
Yes.
anybody and through human efforts we can achieve it. This is the example. There are the examples.
Yeah. Because, it says, the vow says to accomplish it perfectly. That means, it's a possible way. It's not the path that's impossible to achieve. Whatever the Buddha achieved, we can achieve. Whatever the Bodhisattvas had achieved, we can achieve.
There is no illusion in that. There is no illusion in that.
Yes. I think that's very, very beautifully said, Umesh bhai. So anyone has anything to offer on this, reflecting on this?
Yeah, Rahul here.
Rahul bhai.
I think from this 4 points, I think means from the various perspective, there may be more than 4 things we can take away from these things. Means we can interpret in different things. Like the first vow is, there are beings without limit. Let us take vow to convey them all across. So I think first thing what we can take is that this is same as Bahujan Hitaye, Bahujan Sukhaye. As many as we can work from, as many as we can. And the second, what we have learned in the Karmiya Metta Sutta, that Tasava Thavarava Anukathula, that is a Pali words, means apart from human beings, he is also taking care or thinking compassion about the other small animals, Tasava Thavarava, or very small animals, Anukathula, like that one. The second one I would like to reflect, like there are depravitives in us without number. Let us take the vow to extinguish them all. So, like, what I want to think in means, particularly from Indian Buddhist point of view, that unless and until we are full of depravity, so it should not be our prime effort to spread up the Dhamma. First, we should have at least the confidence that we are practicing it and we know it up to a little extent. Then I think we should try to spread that one. Otherwise, there won't be accuracy into that one. And another thing I would like to comprehend is that there is the way of Buddha without comparison. I think there is one a Pali line is there, that Natti me sarnangayang, Dhammo me sarnangvarang. I think that is the meaning of that one. Yeah, that I wanted to.
And you left to reflect on the third one. There are truths without end. Let's take the vow to comprehend them all.
I think that's come under the Arya Ashtangik Marga's right efforts. I think this all four we can put into the right efforts. So under the right efforts, we should always try to get the truth, the ultimate truth. There are the four stages. So among that's how we are approaching towards that truth one by one. So I think that is the ultimate state. Whenever apart from this four dhyana, there is one dhyana that we can feel ourselves as a part of universe rather than from the feelings of mankind and the other things on the earth. We can also feel the part of universe, and that type of feeling, that type of detachment, we can experience in that one. So that is a very higher stage of we can say a meditation, or we can say so far as the evolution is concerned, there are lower evolutions, and these are four vows, I think, the part of the higher evolution, and that is the uniqueness of especially Buddhism.
So I think what I gather from Rahul's comment is this, that there are many ways by which even these four great vows can be expressed or understood, and that's the beauty of it. The more we reflect on these vows, the more we try to make these vows a kind of a living force in our lives. As I was commenting on that, whenever we vow to do something, those vows start having the effect on us. And in the Buddhist history, as I was saying, that the vows are of very great importance. There are certain vows which cannot be broken. There are certain vows which are taken by a particular practitioner. So I think these vows can be expressed, can be understood in many different ways. And one of the ways this can be understood is the way of taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. How do we take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha? We take the refuge in the Buddha by practicing, by walking on his footsteps. And Baba Ambedkar has used a very beautiful word in Marathi, anusara. We follow the Buddha. We walk in the footsteps of the Buddha. We try to be, the way he was. And I think that explains in a way how we are going to take refuge in the Buddha. How do we take refuge in the Dhamma? By removing a lot of depravities in us, isn't it? By cultivating the truths which are without end. And there are beings without limit. It's like practicing these, taking refuge in the Sangha, liberating all the beings. And so this is one way of looking at it. The other way is to keep an attitude of being humble in the light of what we are supposed to accomplish, isn't it? In the life, in the way the practice is endless. It's never ending practice. We cannot say that my practice stops here. It has no end, because there are beings without limit. There are depravities in us without number. There are truths without end. We have to comprehend them. And the Buddha's way is not easy to achieve. And to achieve it perfectly is another ordeal. So you see, the practice has no limit. Taking the refuge has no limit. It's like never-ending process, isn't it? And that's why these four vows, if we reflect on them, if we make them our own, they begin to have an effect on our being, on the world around. They sort of help to spread the Dhamma. So good Rahul bhai, good reflection.
Thank you.
So from anybody, anything from anyone? If not, then what I will do, I will just reflect for another few minutes before we end. And you see, we have been studying the Buddha and Dhamma for a long time now. It's like almost going to be 2 years. And when we begin to come to the end of a certain book, we have to understand the mind of a writer. And here, even the writer himself is a great bodhisattva. He's somebody who was liberated, has liberated infinite human beings. And when he is now coming to the end of writing his great book, he's trying to give something very precious to us, something very important to us, isn't it? Even distilling down the total sort of the pith or the essence of what he wants to convey. And I think that these last sections of the Buddha's Dhamma can be looked at as the essence or even the pith of what Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar wanted to convey to us throughout the book of the Buddha's Dhamma. I reckon that if we cultivate this with the 4 vows, if we take them as a vows, unbreakable sort of the vows, and if we make them our own, like look at the beauty of this first vow, isn't it? There are beings without limit, so there is no end to the beings, and so there is no end to our efforts to convey them across paramita, convey them across from this shore to that shore. That means to bring in, to practice the 6 or 10 paramitas, and the paramitas themselves become a vehicle to convey the beings across. But it's without limit. We are not limiting ourselves to one particular class of people or that particular class of people, without limit. The word of importance is without limit. And then most of the times we assume that we are like we are special, we have we have all the qualities, but we don't realize that there are so many depravities in us, and those depravities sometimes limit our being. But that doesn't mean that we cannot work on them. It means what the Buddha is suggesting through this practice is to continuously work on your own minds. And as we have seen in the Buddha's Dhamma, that Babasaheb Ambedkar talks about the training of the mind, working on our mind, removing the negative mental states. It's not easy, but still we have to first accept that there are depravities in us. We are always pointing out to others instead of looking at ourselves, isn't it? And this vertical vows brings us back to our own responsibility to take charge of our own shortcomings, to take charge of our own failings, to take charge of our own limitations, and extinguish them all. Not only understand that we have depravities in many ways, but also take the vow to extinguish them all, isn't it? Not just working on this side of a being or that side of a being. Total being has to be worked into, and to have the attitude of learning, to have that mind of a beginner, to be able to explore everything, isn't it? Not limiting our focus on only one particular thing. The bodhisattva should be accomplished one. They should be master of many things, all things if possible. And the way of the Buddha, it's a matter of the faith. It's a matter of following the teacher. It's a matter of following the Shakyamuni Buddha, walking on the same path he walked, the way he lived. And if we want a live example, we have the example of Babasaheb Ambedkar himself. He has walked in a way that can be practiced by us all. So I think these 4 vows are very important, and I think they have to become the part of our daily recitation, isn't it? We should reflect on them, like in the Chinese and Japanese tradition. They make nice calligraphy out of it and put in their homes, and they become the kind of reminder, constant reminder to them as to how they can practice the Buddha Dhamma from moment to moment in their everyday life. So I think we will stop here, and we will meet next Sunday, which will be our last sort of discussion on the last section of the Buddha's Dhamma. So thank you so much all for joining in, and see you next Saturday. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you.
Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.